All right, Huff, we're back at it. We're on the back stretch of the Bravery Tour circuit. I think 5 tournaments left, 4 tournaments left. That's how many we've done. That's where my mindset's at. I don't even remember. It's just my mind is pudding. But I'm excited for this one. We got the Gem State Shootout in Boise, Idaho, and this is a really fun one. Great location. Idaho has seen a lot of growth in the 7-on-7 world the last about 5-6 years. Few people have been kind of spearheading it on the ground, but more and more programs popping up. You got Utah right next door, so really good location. Just drove out here last night, excited to be out here. So first off, I'll take a step back, Huff. Let's get you introduced to. I always say if someone was under a rock and not paying attention to this industry and had to get an explanation of who you are. But we got Brandon Huffman here, national recruiting editor of 247 Sports. Always fun to have you, Huff. How you doing? You've been traveling? Any first class flights to Hawaii? You gonna like the backhanded? Well, I was in Mexico or Hawaii or Texas.
Well, I mean, I already got my seats upgraded to Boise first class, both to and from. Now, it's not as big of a flex as you think it is. I'm on one of those little Embraer planes, and I do have an entire row to myself because those planes are so tiny that in first class, the first rows, I think the first 3 rows, there's one seat, and I got one seat. I could sit next to someone, or I could sit by myself in first class. So I will be enjoying my water that I get on those quick little puddle jumper flights.
I think, I always tell people like when I see skinny people and I say, look, me being overweight, like I just think ahead to when it's winter time because I have extra insulation. The other thing is I need to start taking advantage. I think it's Southwest Airlines. You get the
Mhm.
you get the plus size, you get the extra seat next to it. So moving forward, I'm going to be Southwest Airlines. Just fine. I'm going to start setting up our tour to just be in hubs where Southwest Airlines goes, so I can just have my own 2 seats on the airplane. I'm going to be Huffman style VIP. You're a VIP because you actually have it. I'll be a plus size, but either way,
Well, hey, you're only a year away from the Bravery jet that will be gifted to the
yes,
organization.
there we go. I like it. Now we're talking. Okay, so speaking of the Gem State Shootout, we've got some programs, some new programs in this tournament, Huff, that we haven't seen this year. We have some that have been in previous tournaments that we have a little bit better feel and idea for. So we'll hop right into it. You're the expert. We bring you in to talk about some of these programs, some of these kids. Let's start out as we're coming into Boise, Idaho. The Bell Cow program, 2A Platinum, run by Just Jackson. Just is a California native that has moved out to Idaho and really planted stakes and done an incredible job of growing this area, not just in numbers of programs and kids playing, but in exposure with colleges and media. He runs a big showcase in the summer that I recommend kids and families go get signed up for. He has a lot of good coaches and schools coming. So talk a little bit about 2A Platinum. They have 12 teams in this tournament, just to give you an idea of numbers between all the different age divisions. But obviously, Huff, you're not here to talk about the 10U or 12U kids. So go ahead and talk about maybe some of the better high school kids that play for 208.
Yeah, I mean, you look at 208 and just kind of what they've done. I mean, the way that they've expanded their roster and they've been doing a lot of national tournaments, and it's been great to see. You're going back, and we'll talk about Triple Threat in a bit. The first time I saw them was 3 years ago in Bullhead City at Pylon. They made it to the championship game. So, do not sleep on these Boise teams and their ability to be competitive, but also in their ability to crank out recruits. The highest rated player in the history of the state of Idaho was Gatlin Barrett, who we saw at the opening association event last year in Seattle. And, he kind of went on to become perhaps the best player to ever play in the state, the best recruit to ever come from the state. And this year they've got some dudes. Ryan Brecky, a kid that I saw last week at the Under Armour camp in Seattle, #1 player in the state in 2026 out of Owyhee High School. And then in 2025, they got Isaiah Reed, who's the #1 player in 2025 out of Rocky Mountain, a linebacker. I also saw at Under Armour Mason Cron as well. They got Malachi Claunch, who's from Montana and neighboring Montana. They've had a little bit of a market in Montana the last couple of years. Remember Reed Harris,
Yeah.
2 years ago, coming out and We saw him in Northwest 9 3 years ago, and now he's at Boston College. I think he's playing outside linebacker, but played for Montana. So it's not just Idaho. They'll get some guys from Montana as well. Shane Williams Rhodes, the former Boise State star, and Jess Jackson do a fantastic job, bottom to top with those teams. So I'm excited to get out there and see it. I saw Jess was tweeting that, looking at getting some food trucks. So after what we did in Oregon,
yes,
your move,
high
Jess.
bar, high bar, high bar. Yeah, and Gatlin, it was crazy because we watched him, and then he ends up committing to Boise State, and the hometown hero, that was such a big deal. And then obviously things kind of fell apart, ends up at Oregon. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to watch. And that's the cool thing is you see some of these kids as 8th or 9th graders coming up, and that's where credibility comes in with these programs, Huff, is we deal with these guys. We're on the front lines of this every day. I tell people like West Coast, all of the programs we're dealing with, you even more so. And it comes about credibility because all of these guys are trying to promote their program, sell their kids. And it's like, look, I get you're doing that, but when you're just selling all these kids to just sell them, I start tuning you out, your credibility goes down. And I mention it because with Just, he reminds me a lot of kind of how Nate Kenyon and Julian Kenyon with KT Prep are, where they'll say, hey, my senior class isn't as strong, but man, my freshman class, my sophomore class, like these guys coming through, look out. And just his credibility is up there, nationally with people as far as being legitimate about the kids he has, the program, where it's at, all of that. So,
well, and I think back to like
to
last spring when we were in the Bay Area, when they made it to the championship game and lost to Wall Street.
Wall Street out of Dallas.
But they were missing Gatlin Bear. They were missing a lot of key guys. And then before the tournament or before the playoffs started, I remember Shane said, hey, I got this kid who's a freshman, Ryan Brecky. I want you to keep an eye on this redhead kid. You couldn't miss him. Dad played at Boise State. And then over the course of the next few months, I'd see him at camps. And, then seeing him this year, you could see why he's an elite player. And this was kind of as a freshman, like, hey, I'm not saying he's going to be elite, but I'm saying this is a name you should know. So they're very good about not overselling and kind of underselling to it. Like, hey, maybe you don't mind, but we like this kid. Keep an eye on him. And then 2 years later, you're like, hey, damn, that kid was really good. Like, yeah, we told you. Remember we introduced you? Yeah, I remember, Shane.
There you go.
I owe Shane a bunch of beer from a bet we lost. So I'm trying to see if he'll forgive me by throwing nice compliments his way.
You mentioned it in a couple sentences ago. We've talked about 2A Platinum. Let's stay on the ground in the Boise area. Talk about triple threat. Now, when they started out, they used to be Stormore sheds. And I remember them coming out to tournaments, and it was Steve Martinez is in charge of running that program. And he had his oldest son, and then he had some younger sons coming through. And it seems like there's always like an older son playing on his 18U team, and then there's a younger son playing on like a 10U or 12U team, and it's the same case this year. Triple Threat has 4 teams in this tournament, and obviously they're headlined by their high school team and Steve's son Zeke, absolute stud at quarterback. Steve has had all of his sons stud quarterbacks that have already come through or will be coming through. Talk a little bit about Triple Threat, another program that just always wins, is always talented, coached well. They do it right. Steve's a great guy. So talk a little bit about Triple Threat, Huff.
It's funny. I was texting with Joe Moorhead, who's now the head coach at Akron. And we were talking about when his son Donovan came to the Northwest 9 in 2021, when it was out in Yakima. And I think he was a 7th grader at the time. And we were talking about that Yakima trip. And I started thinking back to how good that event was. You had Jabari Johnson, who had a phenomenal spring game for Oregon State last weekend. You had Josh Wood, who was the Gatorade Player of the Year in Washington that fall. But that fall, there was also an 8th grader going into his 9th grade year who I think ended up being the MVP for the freshman division, and that was Zeke Martinez, who later that year, his brother Malachi was also there. And, earlier in that spring, Triple Threat had made it to the championship game at Pylon, and Malachi was their quarterback. And during the course of that season in 2021, Malachi got hurt, and Zeke came in as a freshman, and they didn't really skip a beat. And you could kind of see then that Zeke was going to be potentially a better quarterback than Malachi. Now, as the firstborn, in my own family, you never want to concede that your brother's better. Shout out John Harbaugh for beating Jim in the Super Bowl. But you don't want to concede that. But when you watch Zeke, you could see, hey man, this guy's got some tools to him. Just got his first couple of offers in the last 10 days.
Memphis, right?
And then Nebraska Kearney last week. So, top rated quarterback in the state of Idaho. They've won a number of tournaments over the year. I was in the last time I went to an actual 7-on tournament in Boise was 2 years ago. Been there for some camps, but Triple Threat beat Platinum or Rare 208 Platinum in the championship game, and Zeke won the MVP. So a fantastic quarterback. And the thing about him is, what makes him so good, you don't necessarily see in 7-on because he's really good with his legs. But he wants to throw the ball. He's a pass first quarterback, and that's why 7-on-7 is so good for him, because he wants to get in the pocket, he wants to extend plays, he wants to get the ball downfield, and he's certainly a guy to watch. And like I said, top quarterback in the 2025 class in the state.
Yeah, and I love it because he's that what you want in a quarterback, the leader. I love watching him in these tournaments because you really see how he commands the huddle, how he handles, after throwing an interception. He doesn't throw many, but how he handles it. And he just from A to Z, he is that quarterback that you say, man, if I'm a college coach and running a program, that's the guy I want. He's going to be in the weight room first. He's going to be in the film room before you ask him to be. He's going to have great grades. He's going to be making good decisions off the field, and he's an absolute stud on the field. You'll win with the kid at any level he goes to. He will win. He's one of those guys, and just a great kid, great family. And he's got his younger brother on one of the youth teams that there's some good youth matchups. I'm really excited to see Big 12 out of Vancouver and Triple Threat. Their young teams, I think their 12U teams, have been winning all their tournaments. This will be the first one they're in together. And Zeke's younger brother, I think, is the quarterback of that team. So we don't talk many youth programs and matchups and features, but that should be a fun one. So excited to see Triple Threat, their first tournament this year. They're in of ours. Another program from Boise, it's their first tournament with us this year, is Boise Tropics. This is a program got started up a couple years ago. I believe, not as familiar, but Clyde is overseeing Boise Tropics and running that. They have Boise Tropics Clyde, Boise Tropics James. Those are their teams that they're running with. They got 4 teams in this tournament, and I know they've had talent over the years. This is another year where they have some talent. Couple names that I'll mention as I've scouted them. We haven't seen them in person this year, so it's harder to say, but we've seen them in the past, and obviously have kept up with their program and the kids on it. You got Tayshawn Reese, class of 2025 out of Rocky Mountain High School. You got Trey Jacobson, another 25 class out of Rocky Mountain High School, 6'2", 200. Jeff Thompson, he's at Rocky Mountain High School, 5'8", 160 pounds. Trey Broadbent, a 2025 kid out of Rocky Mountain High School, and Henry Nelson, he's a class of 2026 from Mountain View, 4.0 GPA kid, 6'3", 185 pounder. So just a couple names as I've been researching them and following them and seeing what they're doing. I know I just threw all those names out there, but Huff, any thoughts on Boise Tropics?
Yeah, Tayshawn Reese actually just tagged me. He ran a personal record this week on the 4x100 relay. A guy that we've been able to see the last couple of years, getting out there, getting to see a lot of schools. I got to say with Boise Tropics too, they have some of the most fire-looking uniforms. I mean,
yes,
you've seen. I mean, TB, I get texts from you all the time where you're referencing that movie, and so I know you're a big semi-pro guy, but those uniforms always just make me feel like I'm in some exotic locale, and not in the middle of the state of Idaho, but more like on the beaches of Hawaii.
Yes, and the movie we're referencing with Will Ferrell, the Flint Tropics, and I still every year we present Huff with the $10,000 check, the big oversized check. It takes me back to that scene. Hey man, the bank tells me I can't cash the check. What's going on? So that's what Huff is referencing every year that we bring up. So yes, shout out to Boise Tropics and their unis. They definitely are swaggy, and they're swaggy on the field too. They play really well, really talented team. So I'm excited to see them this weekend. It'll be our first time this year on the circuit. So excited. Now we've talked some local teams. Let's talk some teams that are coming in from out of town. CUC, coaches under construction, I believe is what that stands for. Trey Taylor runs that program. They're out of Sacramento, California. We've seen them already this year on our circuit. This will be the second or third tournament, I believe they're in, coming out to Boise, bringing their middle school team, bringing their high school team. They got some dudes. I'll talk about CUC and a couple of their kids.
Yeah, got a chance to see a couple of their guys last weekend when they were at the Under Armour camp. Mason Johnson, or not Mason Johnson, sorry, Wesley Johnson is one of them. He's a big kind of a power running back, and they're one of those teams that it's funny when you talk with Trey. He'll be the first one to tell you, like, hey man, we're still trying to get to that point where we can be competitive in these tournaments. And what I love about them is that you can see them getting better and better each tournament that they play. And I mean, their first couple tournaments they showed up in 2 years ago, they were getting mollywopped, and now they're competitive. And I think that I love that they get out and they travel. They've got some dudes. I mean, they've had some dudes the last couple of years that signed. Their best prospect is a defensive lineman, 330 pounder. They brought to the events Josiah Sharma as a tight end. But they've got some skill position guys as well. Like I said, Wesley Johnson's one of those. So there's certainly some tools there to play with there. And, perhaps they get their breakthrough tournament this weekend.
They have another kid that interests me a lot. I believe you guys have him as a 3-star. Lono. Is it?
Lono Shootout, yep.
Yeah, Lono Showtime. I'm really excited to see him out of
Vancouver. Yeah, I forgot about Lono because he'll actually he's visiting Boise State this weekend, which you can mention, just kind of that side plus right there. But he's mentioned Boise State a long, you can't spell long without Lono, or at least the first 3 letters, but lengthy kid, 6'4", can play receiver, can play corner, can play safety. I like him defensively, but a guy that I think, has a bright future because you don't see the length like that at a lot of guys out west. And the positional versatility, plus the willingness, the openness to play the other side of the ball.
Yeah, that's crucial.
Because these kids. I mean, TV, you and I have had this conversation for years. When going back to the Barton football camps that you were doing 15 years ago, and you'd see a kid work out at one position. You're like, man, if you were in the South, you would be playing that other position and probably making a lot of money. And West Coast kids have been reticent to making.
They didn't want to do it.
They don't want to do it. They're offensive guys, and partly I blame you because 7-on-7 is so big out here. These kids want the ball in their hands.
Yeah,
you see some guys like, hey man, I know you love this position, but do you love getting paid well? Because if you this side, you're going to get paid very well. And I think Lono has become much more open to that over the spring. We saw him in Oregon a couple of weeks ago. He was playing with West Coast Preps at that tournament. And you just see the athleticism that he has. And, it could be a guy that Boise State makes a move on this weekend.
Yeah, and that was, Richard Sherman was a receiver at Sanford and then goes to DB, and you see the pro career he had. Boise State, and that's what's fun. We've talked about all of our tournaments lining up college visits with them. Our Portland tournament, everyone went down and saw Oregon State, Portland State for Boise this weekend, getting Boise State visits. So it's cool.
Remember, guys got offers too. When they came out for the Oregon, the Canby tournament, there were guys that came from multiple different states that went to Oregon State and got offered. And, Oregon's not an easy school to get an offer from. We know that. They're recruiting as a top program nationally. They were the Big Ten highest rated recruiting class. Yes, I said Oregon in the Big Ten, but guys came to the Canby 7-on-7 tournament, went to Oregon and got offered. So, these aren't just little courtesy visits that these guys are getting. These are real recruits that these coaches are wanting.
Yeah, they're real. They're real. They're getting results. And that's ultimately what we're about. This is a way to showcase and platform these kids for competition on the field, for visits, for everything. Last team to mention here, Grind City out of Moses Lake, Washington. One of those kind of sleeper teams. They're my dark horse to win this tournament. So talk a little bit about Grind City. We've seen them in a couple tournaments. They travel around, very competitive. They played really well last weekend in Ellensburg. I think Boise could be their breakthrough tournament. They're kind of like Washington's version of triple threat, if that makes sense. So talk a little bit about Grind City.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Grind City and you look at kind of Moses Lake, and I think back to my history in this job. A lot of times the guys from Moses Lake have been linemen, and there's been some linemen that have gone and played Power 5 football from that school in that area. But you look at Brady J, and he is a offensive guy at the skill position, not a guy that we're saying go switch your position. He's a quarterback, an all-conference quarterback, a hooper as well, and he's got 2 years left. I know he really impressed at the Battle in the Berg last week. So, that's a big thing to go to these events when you're in Moses Lake, and, it's a very centralized part of the state, but you're in a state where all the eyes from the college coaches tend to be in Seattle. So you go to where the talents are, you go to where the eyes are. And they went out, Grand City went out to Ellensburg last week. You got Demetrius Holman as well, who's another two-way athlete, can play receiver, can play safety, both 2026s. So a couple of guys to keep an eye on for the long run out of Grind City.
Yeah, I love them too. They're great. They're parents, they're coaches. Sometimes we deal with those programs that it's just idiot coaches and parents, and the kids follow their lead. Grind City does it the right way. People that'll be there this weekend, you'll see what I'm talking about. They if it's a bad call, it's a bad call, and they just play through it. They're not over there acting a fool. So I love how Grind City conducts themselves. One of my favorite programs to see and watch. Stud kids, good coaches, everything. So I'm excited. This could be their tournament, their breakthrough tournament. I would love to see it. So couple programs to mention, Huff, as we just kind of wrap this up. Idaho Air Raid, Oakley Hussey is running that, and they're out of is it the Pocatello area?
Pocatello, Idaho Falls, all that area, kind of the eastern part of Idaho.
Yeah, I'm excited to see them. They got a couple teams coming. This is their first tournament with us. We got FCA out of Oregon. They're out of the Wilsonville area. They have a combination of kids from Wilsonville and Canby and some other spots. They won a tournament last year in Seattle. So this is a very talented team. They got good kids, coached well. They're another one that's kind of a dark horse coming into this tournament. I think they could really step up and surprise some people. You got Rain out of the Boise, Idaho area. They came down to Northern Cal and made the championship game in the high school division or semifinals. They lost to Rebel Squad out of Kahuku Hawaii. They got their youth teams in this week. We got Goon Squad out of LA coming up. I love having Goon Squad. They were in our LA tournament. They do a good job. They're on their Boise State visit this weekend as well. Another one I'm excited to see is All Poly out of Utah. They're one of the chapters of Tip Top based out of Ogden, Utah. So I'm excited. Saleh runs that program. Ben Moa, Nate, all those guys do a really good job. They were at our Portland tournament. Great seeing those guys. Flight Club out of Bend, Oregon. They did our Portland tournament. They're doing this Boise tournament. Chad Carlson is an absolute stud and got his son in that program. They're a middle school team, and they're going to be a brand and a name to remember over these next few years as he builds up that area and that program. We got MBC. Matthew McCracken runs that program. They're a middle school team. The middle school division is going to be so competitive in this tournament. I'm really excited to see a Big 12 Triple Threat, NBC, a few others. So these are all programs that have been winning tournaments and beating people. So, something's got to give this tournament. So I'm excited to see it. I mentioned Big 12. They've got their youth programs come in. They've been winning a bunch of tournaments. So I'm really excited to see that featured matchup, the Big 12 versus Triple Threat in that 12U division. And then high school division, last program to mention, we got GAS. John Evans runs that program. They're out of Boise. If you want to the price of admission is worth paying to come see John on the sidelines during games. He'll have the little gas can. He'll get under the skin of every team and coach he's playing. There'll almost be 15 different fights because people just feel some type of way, but absolutely entertaining. John has a good heart, good dude, high energy. A couple other programs to mention: Magic Valley Young Bucks, North Valley Thunder, and Elevate. All teams from out here in Idaho. First time seeing them in our circuit this year. A couple of them first time ever having in our circuit. So excited to see all these different programs. We also have 5-on-5 going on Sunday. Couple teams. We've got OFA coming out of Utah. We got In the Trenches has a couple teams, North Valley Thunder. And then I believe there's another one. I forget the name. Hold on, let me pull it because I want to make sure I'm doing justice. EPT. They have two teams, an East and a West team. So that'll be Sunday only. So come on out, check out the tournament. We'll have Huff mentioned the food trucks out there. 7-on-7 pool play going Saturday. Single elimination going Sunday. 5-on-5 will be going Sunday, pool play and elimination. Huffman, the man himself, will be in attendance. If you don't see him on the field, he will be over at the food trucks. But this is different. This is Huff this year is a more disciplined Huff. So I will be over at the food truck. So that's, if you want to find me, that's where I will be. But should be a really fun weekend. Great area. I'm excited to keep seeing this tournament grow. I love this area. Huff, been fun, my friend. We're getting to the end of the circuit here, so couple more and we're done. I guess just real quick, any final thoughts on the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to get out and see the linemen. You know, we didn't touch on them much, but Jax Tanner is the top lineman in the state in 2026, #2 prospect in the state. You'll get a chance to see him. The first player that in-state that Boise State offered in the 2026 class, Jake Pele. Hey, shout out Auburn Riverside, Lakeland Hills.
Hey.
What are we, 253-98092? He runs that, in the trenches, ITT. So it's going to be good to get out there and see the lineman. For my boy Willie Kofi, I'm going to be out in Salt Lake City next week, in fact,
Really? Yeah.
for his lineman event. So I'm excited to see Opa coming up this weekend. And, you know, there's some big boys in the state of Idaho. So the linemen should be cracking on Sunday. A good way to end the weekend as we head into May.
Let's go. All right. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We will see you this weekend. It's at Centennial High School. Come check it out if you're around. Be fun. Get some good food, see some good players in state, out of state. Going to be another fun tournament.